For anybody who's interested, what is the name of that video that you put out?
I think it's the ancient structure, like it's said to be greater than the pyramids. I try to tease it a little bit, but it's on my channel. I mean,
well, it was a good tease. You got me.
Thank you.
I dove right in, and I remember I was in the gym while I was watching it, and I literally stopped working out. And I was like, okay, I got to pause this because this is not something that I can consume while I'm working out. I need to like really pay attention to this because it's so wild.
Yeah, and I honestly that I'm grateful for how like that video took off. Like for me, it took off way bigger than ones that I've done in the past. I talked about the labyrinth in the past, and it's a much longer video. And I was really glad to get the chance to dive into these details because I've been wanting to revisit the labyrinth for a long time. However, there's just been recently a bunch of new data that came up about things that happened a decade or two ago, or inside the last decade that really changed that picture. And it was things like the Merlin Burrows scans that correlated other scans and also reported on, there seems to be a metallic object down there. And this isn't sort of crazy emerging science. This is a legitimate company that is using technology that's been well established in defence and in the UK defence. It came out of the UK military as a technology that's been more or less proven. So, and the guy that Tim Akers, rest in peace, unfortunately he's since passed, but he, what he said about this object, like he is a credible guy to say this. He doesn't draw conclusions about what it might be, but it's not wood, it's not stone, it's metal. It's not unlike other metal that he's seen, although they couldn't classify what exact type of metal it is. But he said, there is in this central atrium, because the labyrinth has multiple levels, and it's almost like imagine yourself standing in a shopping mall, and you have that central atrium where you can see all these levels, and it's like this big central chamber that connects to these multiple levels. It's open. It's at least 40 meters long. It's really tall, and in the center of it is what's more than 40 because it contains this single sort of 40 meter long object that's sitting in there.
So how did you find out about the labyrinth? Like this is something that has been talked about for a long time.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, but no one, it's not in any like traditional archaeology books. It's not.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah. No, it is. So the labyrinth is kind of this is the other part that drew me to it. Is that it isn't something that's coming out of left field, right? It's not like this, no one ever heard of this before. It's literally a structure that was written about extensively over hundreds of years in antiquity by authors like Herodotus, Diodorus Siculus, Pliny the Elder, Strabo, Polonius Mela. Like there's all of these writers of antiquity, and you're talking about time frames from like 500 BC up to the 1st century AD, had visited it, and they'd written about it and talked about it, and they gave it this legend. Guys like Herodotus said that it surpasses the pyramids in grandeur, and then you have, so this is from Herodotus's Histories in the 5th century BC, and he says, "For this I saw myself, and I found it greater than words can say. For if one should put together and reckon up all the buildings and all of the great works produced by the Hellenes, the Greeks, they would prove to be inferior in labour and expense to this labyrinth." So he's saying that all of the temples of the Greeks, of ancient Greece, you've been there, you've seen the Acropolis, and just if you added them all up, the labour to produce them would be inferior in what it would take to just make this one thing in Egypt, the labyrinth.
That is underground.
That's underground, right.
How do conventional archaeologists approach this? Do they discuss this at all?
Yeah, so they do. It's been discussed. What happened was, so you had... we always kind of knew where it was. So, you have the classical authors of antiquity, which coincides with what you might call the Ptolemaic period of ancient Egypt. It's the transition from dynastic Egypt into becoming essentially a Roman province, like an imperial province of Rome. And that runs you up to about, 400 or 500 AD. And then sort of, civilization we have the Dark Ages, sort of have Roman Empire collapses. And it's not until, again, you get to the Renaissance and you have... artists and other authors are looking at these historical accounts and they're talking about it, they're drawing it. Some of the depictions you see from the labyrinth are in that. And then again, not until the emergence of what I would call modern archaeology in the 18th century. So guys like Carl Lepsius in the 1700s started to look at these accounts and go and survey the place where they said it was. So, Herodotus and these authors, I selected the quotes here to just, there's a lot more that they say about it. But one of the things they talk about is they kind of give descriptions of where it is. They say it's near what was called Lake Moeris. and it's near a city that was the temple of the crocodiles, Crocodilopolis, or ancient Arsinoe is the other name for it, and we know where that is. And Lake Moeris sort of somewhat still exists. It's much smaller now, but it's in this region called the Fayum of Egypt. So if you ever look at Egypt on a map, you can imagine it's desert, and you have from north to south, you have this green line of the Nile, traces it down. But on the left side, you look at, there's this leaf-shaped depression that's all green. It's called the Fayum. It's a depression which used to flood with the Nile. Today they use it for agriculture. And it's right at that neck of the Fayum where it connects up to the Nile Valley. And he also described it. They also described the pyramid that's at the site, because there is the pyramid to Amenemhat III on that site. So they give us all these descriptors, and everyone kind of agreed, yeah, so it's at this place called Hawara, where I've been to several times. There's still a pyramid there, and there's these great fields of sand and like little open-air libraries with chunks of stone. And what happened was, so Carl Lepsius went there, and he said, well, I've discovered the ruins of like a Roman town that's built on the surface. There's nothing crazy about it. Flinders Petrie was the guy who kind of got the closest. Now, Petrie went there in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And he was excavating. He dug down 7 or 8 meters. He got down and he found this massive stone slab of beton or plaster that was huge, like 1,000 feet long. Like it was he sort of traced the edges of it. And he's like, I'm standing on the foundation of the labyrinth. So what he said, he's like, it's all gone. Like it's basically, Petrie said, it's been quarried. This place has been a source of stone for literally millennia. So it's gone. So pretty much everyone since then in archaeology, Egyptology is like, and if you look on Wikipedia, they'll tell you, oh, it's gone. It was destroyed, was quarried away. Petrie says, you know, I'm standing on the foundation of it, the bottom layer, and that's it. There's nothing here. And so that's always been kind of the position of orthodox Egyptology. Look in the textbooks, that's where it is. But that's all changed because there's been a whole bunch of different now scientific expeditions there. This is where it gets into some intrigue, because the Matterhorn expedition, the Cairo University expedition, I mean, these happened. Their results have come out since, but they were covered up at the time. They were suppressed. So the first guy to
What year was this?
2008 was the Matterhorn expedition.
They were covered up.
Yes. Yeah. So what?
Is this our boy Zawi?
Yeah, Zahi it is.
Zahi. Sorry.
It was. And look,
Zawi.
and again, not my words. This is the words of Louis de Cordier, he's a Belgian artist and entrepreneur who funded and drove the Matterhorn expedition. He did it in conjunction with the Supreme Council of Antiquities, which at the time was helmed by Zahi Hawass. Also with the NRIAG, which is the National Research Institute for like basically subsurface studies. So that's those guys dragging that box around. So they used a whole bunch of different techniques to look at these areas around that pyramid at the site of Hawara, things like ground-penetrating radar, geomagnetism, very low frequency, like seismic tomography, electrical resistivity tomography. There's a bunch of different techniques that are well-established. Known science. This isn't like the Kafre scan stuff where it's like you can debate the merits of the technology. This is established technology. And they found the labyrinth. So, and what he found is that, yes, so what Lepsius said about the ruins of a Roman or Greek or Persian town with mud bricks and stuff, yep, that's there in the first few meters. You go down, then you hit the water table. So that's the other issue on this site is the water table. So the water's at like 5 meters below the surface. And under that is the slab that Petrie found. So like 6-7 meters is at that huge slab that Petrie found that he thought was the foundation. And then below that, Petrie didn't dig deep enough. Below that, we can find essentially a labyrinthian structure of granite and very, very dense rocks and walls and like a maze-like structure that has walls that are meters thick. There's another great slide in there that's the green, and it's the actual VLF, right? That's it there. So yeah, so this is at 8 meters with VLF sounding, so you can see like this labyrinthian structure of these walls and all of these lines and walls. So these are like granite, and the scale of this, it's 100 meters vertically by 150 meters.
100 meters tall.
Well, no, so
vertically?
No. So the y-axis, I guess, of this. So we're looking down in the ground here, but you got to look at the scale. Like across the top, that's 150 meters, right? So, I mean, what, 450 feet? So these are big walls. These are big chambers and big walls.
For people at home, it's like a football field.
Yeah, it's a football field. Well, it's more. I mean,
100 meters.
I mean, in Australia, it's my 100 meters is the football field, I think. I don't know how big. It's pretty
what's
close
100
here.
yards? What is the difference between 100 yards and 100 meters?
It's 100 yards is a little less. Little less. So 150 meters, and this is only a section of the labyrinth. They scanned 2 sections. The labyrinth itself is said to be much, much larger than this. So they found...
Much larger than that.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah, no, it's
So
it
what is
extends.
the overall structure? Like,
It's like 1,000 feet at least.
Wow.
Like 3, 4, 5 times that size. I mean, you have to go back to the... We have some better indication with the more modern space-based scans now, but when they did the geophysical, like the ground penetrating radar scan, so they scanned 2 areas. That was the bigger one, like in front of the pyramid. Then they did another one on the other side of the canal that runs through the site today, and they found it on both sides. So that's the difference between like what we say about the lab, like what the textbooks will tell you about the labyrinth, it not being there and it being destroyed, to no, we've actually, now there's been the Matterhorn expedition confirmed it was there. And so what happened, this was interesting, and I have, I think, reasoning for why this happened, but it was covered up. And these are the words, like Louis de Cordier, he eventually got sick of waiting, because what happens in Egypt, anything you do, whether it's you're an academic institution or you're an individual or a group that's funding some sort of expedition, you work with the Council of Antiquities today. It's the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. But they essentially, it takes years to get access. And then once you do, though, they control release of information. So that's always part of the deal, right? It's that Egypt gets to do the announcing, and if and when they choose.
And they have dismissed things in the past that they then accepted later.
Yeah, a great example is the Scan Pyramids project. So they got ahead of themselves a little bit. This is the muon detection, the cosmic ray detection stuff. They've been running that experiment for years at Giza in the Great Pyramid. They and every time I go in there, there's always different sets of equipment at different places on it. But these muon detectors, they have them under the ground and in the Grand Gallery, and it just takes years to collect data. Occasionally, these cosmic particles, they'll pick one up, and you're able to detect voids, or they can somehow tell the difference between it traveling through solid matter versus a void. It takes years to build up a resolute picture. But once they did, they said, oh, okay, so we've discovered that big void in the pyramid, but they'd also discovered the small void at the main entrance. If you look up at it today, there's those chevron blocks. Like above, you go in down here at the Al Mamoun's tunnel, but at the top where the descending passage actually exits the pyramid, the original entrance, there's these big chevron blocks, and behind that's that chamber. So you remember a few years ago they made a big fuss. And as an example, like when the Scan Pyramids guys on their own initiative announced that we've made these discoveries, I mean, Zahi basically came out and said, this is bullshit, this doesn't exist. There's nothing there, and if there is something there, we knew about it already. And you go on a couple of years, and when now it's time to do the press releases and to roll out, the footage, and who's standing at the podium making the announcement and showing the footage. Zahi's doing it.
He has to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating situation over there with him.
Yes. I did a video. I just released it a few days ago that got into some even more intrigue about stuff that's happened at Giza at the Giza Plateau in the 1990s, which we can get into that too. But so yeah, what happened with the Matterhorn expedition and the labyrinth was that 2008 and 9 they finished their on-site work. They're ready to release the data. They put on a very small public lecture at Ghent University in Belgium. No one really attended it. And then they got told to stop. And again, in the words of Louis de Cordier, because he waited like 2 or 3 years and then he put this out there, he said that he was told to cease any and all discussion or release of information from the Matterhorn project, and him and his team members were threatened with national security sanctions from Egypt, which means that, I think at the low, like if you come to Egypt, we'll arrest you, and if not, when maybe we'll come and get you. I don't know. It's national security sanctions.
Isn't there a way to sort of massage that situation and to talk to Zahi and say, listen, you can be the guy who found this?
That would have been the case. I think that was a given if it had been released. I actually think in the case, so it's funny. I kind of don't really blame him so much. I think this was a political decision, not so. People say, it's hiding the truth and whatever. Yeah, okay, that's happening. There's new data. There's an amazing find that could change the world. In my opinion, honestly, the labyrinth is the biggest archaeological discovery of the millennium. When we get into what that structure is and how big it is and the way it's reported in antiquity, there's nothing bigger than Herodotus says it surpasses the pyramids. It's like finding more Giza, like a Giza plateau somewhere, like
under the ground.
Under the ground, like you can't. I just think it would be the biggest discovery of the millennium, which is part of the problem.
Just because in that fragment, in that snapshot, in that slither, all we see is some humans with stone tools in caves, doesn't mean that nothing else was happening. So,
well, a good piece of evidence to that would point in that direction is Egypt. Because Egypt, even if you accept the conventional timeline of Egypt, which is 2,500 BC for the Great Pyramid, go look at the rest of the world at 2,500 BC. You don't see anything like that. Nothing even close.
yeah, they were clearly, even if you kind of look at the conventional model of history, the ancient Egyptians were wildly ahead of everyone else.
Everyone.
It's just so weird. It's like,
So weird.
and that's if you, and the conventional model doesn't really give us any explanations of how they were doing what they were
And
doing.
they arrogantly dismiss any other explanations, which is
Yeah.
really weird. When you're talking about these immense structures that are baffling,
Yeah.
absolutely baffling to anybody who's being honest.
Yeah.
What is your take on these Italian researchers that are looking at the tomography and they're looking at these things that they believe are underneath the Great Pyramid and some other structures in Egypt?
Yeah, the kind the what's it called, like SARS Toppler. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm always a little bit suspicious when you make sensationalist claims with new technology, and that doesn't mean it's wrong. That just
Yeah, you
gets
have
my,
to be suspicious because it's bonkers.
It's
I mean, if
crazy.
what they're saying is 2 kilometers deep underneath the Great Pyramid, there's
Yeah.
structures, and there's hundreds of meters of these pylons, these pillars that are in uniform positions with some sort of a coil wrapped around them.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? What is that real? And they reproduce it in multiple different scans, but I don't know what they're seeing. I don't understand the technology, understand where the errors could be, like what could possibly cause it to glitch like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would love it to be true, obviously, because
I would love it.
Can you imagine?
That's the problem. The problem is the same problem that I have with UFOs and everything else.
You
is
want it
that
to be true.
100%. So it really clouds my judgment. And then I have to get my, analytical mind to say, shut up.
Yeah.
Let's look at this honestly.
But I mean, I think, there's definitely something below the Giza Plateau. Like, that's always been written about in ancient sources, and these kind of scans, and then people you have stories of people going down into labyrinths that aren't, accepted by Egyptology, and there's definitely massive mysteries surrounding Giza and the construction of the pyramids and what could potentially be below the pyramids. And this kind of new pyramid scan project has the potential, I think, to, make big progress in understanding what is below Giza. But I don't know, until there's better data out there, I'm not going to, jump to any conclusions and declare that this is like evidence of, a lost advanced technology civilization or anything
No,
like
you
that.
can't. But I am so excited about just the possibility that they're right. Because if they are right, that's the greatest monkey wrench into history that's ever existed. Because explain away that.
Yeah.
With ancient people with stone tools or copper. Like, explain that away.
They'd probably try, mate, because it already doesn't make sense. Their explanation for the construction of the pyramids being wooden sledges and stone chisels or whatever they say, it already doesn't make sense. It's already so ridiculous that I wouldn't even be surprised if they tried to explain away these.
Well,
massive columns,
it'll
but-
discredit them, because the problem is if it does indicate that the pyramid is something other than a tomb,
There's not. I don't even see any evidence that the Great Pyramid at Giza. I mean, what's the evidence that was a tomb? I mean, I don't think they've ever found a body in there.
No.
It's just a chamber which they've called the King's Chamber.
Right.
I mean, I'm not an expert in ancient Egypt by any respect, but it's always baffled me that they're so determined that the pyramids are tombs just because some later pyramids have had, mummies and pharaohs and sarcophagi found inside them. But
That doesn't mean anything, and that doesn't mean that they built it. That also could mean that the pharaoh decided that it was his and wanted to be buried inside of it, and it had existed for thousands of years before they ever even got there.
And you find bodies in buildings today, and that doesn't mean the purpose of that building was to be a tomb.
Right.
It's just someone's
Exactly.
buried there, so someone, as you say,
It's a
thought it
weird
was-
assumption. It's a very weird assumption. And did you ever read any Christopher
Dunn, yeah.
Christopher Dunn's work?
I know a bit. I haven't read his book, but I know a bit about it. And it's interesting. I mean, he's like a serious guy, isn't he? He's like
an engineer.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
he has quite serious theories that,
He thinks it's a power plant.
yeah, which would be crazy, wouldn't it?
Especially if you add into that the Graham Hancock's ideas and some of these other people's ideas that perhaps some of these structures are far older.
Well, the kind of Orion correlation and the
Yes.
Sphinx
Also, the
weathering.
fact that the deeper you go into the sand, the more sophisticated the building techniques are.
Yeah.
That gets weird. Like larger stones. Like, what happened?
The whole of like ancient Egypt and the Sahara Desert in general just doesn't make sense to me, because when you look at the Sahara Desert and the fact that it was green for 9,000 years and then it stopped being green at precisely the time that we're told ancient Egypt emerged, well, that doesn't make sense. That defies how civilization works. Why would a civilization only emerge after the climate got worse? Like,
Right.
That doesn't make sense at all. Like,
And so little research done in sub-Saharan Africa, where they've actually gone into the ground and done like large scale research of these immense areas.
nothing. The Sahara Desert is vast and obviously covered in sand and extremely hot, extremely difficult to survey, politically unstable, and there's basically been no archaeological work done across the whole. And the Sahara Desert is massive. It's like the whole of North Africa, right down to,
Right.
I mean, it's massive, and
You could fit the United States in
you
there.
could fit anything in there, like a whole like preceding civilization for 9,000 years leading up to ancient Egypt. Like, it's the perfect place. It's right by Mesopotamia. It's right by Egypt. And yet we have this blank spot for the 9,000 years before the development of civilization, which is kind of also the gap between, I mean, it's a little bit less than this, but the gap between Göbekli Tepe and the birth of civilization. We have this huge area which would have been perfect for civilization, full of rivers, lakes, grasslands, perfect climate, and it's just missing.
Also, abundant resources where they could establish a stable civilization because they had so much food and they weren't being attacked, so they could kind of set up shop and figure some things out
Yeah.
over a long period of time.
Yeah. So my theory is that things were happening in the Sahara Desert when it was green, in the Green Sahara, for those 9,000 years. And then because it was really quick, that's what I don't think people realize, is that when the Sahara Desert turned from, green, lush paradise, whatever you want to call it, to a desert, it was like a few centuries. It's called rapid desertification, and it flipped, not overnight, obviously, but in a few centuries compared to 9,000 years is a rapid change. And for any kind of culture that was living there, you wouldn't have noticed it straight away, but in 50 years, you'd be like, fuck, it's getting a bit hot here. Do you know what I mean? Like, shit's going on. And then I think maybe people migrated to the last stretch of green that was still available to them, which was the Nile River. And then the kind of survivors or the migratory populations developed around the Nile River, and using the kind of experience and knowledge that they had from their lives and the kind of history of their cultures in the Green Sahara period, that is what led to ancient Egypt. I mean, that's just
Well, it's
theory,
also
but
just an assumption that ancient Egypt didn't exist alongside that,
That's true, yeah.
or even previous to that, which is also possible, especially when you consider what Robert Schoch thinks about the erosion, the water erosion in the Temple of the Sphinx.
Yeah, the kind of explanation away of that also never made sense to me, that it's wind and sand, because when you see pictures of the Sphinx, even from when they kind of found it in Napoleonic times, it's buried in sand.
Right.
And there's records from the Egyptians themselves who, excavated it effectively because it was covered in sand. So if it quickly gets covered in sand, how could it be eroded by wind and sand if it doesn't take very long for it to, kind of get filled up with sand? Then how does wind and sand erosion even count? I've never seen anyone kind of explain that away.
Well, it's the walls that are the most fascinating to me, because the deep fissures that clearly look like rainfall. It looks like something that water does over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And when
There's those whales that were the Valley of the Whales. It's just about, I don't know how many miles south, but it's south of Cairo.
That's bonkers too.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They find
Hundreds of
whales, hundreds of whales in the desert. That's so crazy. Look at that image. That's so nuts. That is so nuts.
Some of them had teeth and toes.
So crazy. So crazy. And then it makes you wonder, like, how did those bones survive? Like, why are they there? Like, how quickly did they die? How quickly did they get covered up by sediment that they could find them all these years later? Because that's the weird thing about fossils and bones in general, is that most of them you're never going to find because they get eaten, they deteriorate, they're gone. Like, it's very difficult to make a fossil. When you think about our, quote unquote fossil record, it's really weird because it's hard to make a fossil.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with a very small amount of beings that get turned into a fossil. And that is what we're using as our understanding of like life.
Yeah, yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird. It is
Because
weird.
it's so limited.
I'm not sure do you know when the Sahara was covered in water? I'm not even sure when that was. I mean, some people say that there's like a mass flood during the kind of Younger Dryas period, which I think is...
I think they're talking about millions of years ago for these bones.
Yeah.
How old are these whale bones supposed to be? But I think millions of years ago, it's assumed that it was completely underwater, right? So are we talking like Pangea times? Like, what are we talking about?
I don't know. But even not too long ago, like, you know, kind of 12,000 years ago, whatever, they had these massive river systems, like the Tamanrasset River system.
Here it is.
40 million years old.
Yeah.
40 million years old.
But I don't know about the whales.
Oh my God.
Primitive whales.
Primitive whales documenting, how do you say that word? Cetacean? How do you say that word? Cetacean transition? Is that how you say
I
it?
don't know.
Cetacean transition to marine life, saurians and reptiles, as well as shark teeth from the Genaham Formation 40 to 41 million years ago. The strata in, I don't say that either, Wad al-Hitan belongs to Middle Eocene epoch, and it contains extensive vertebrate fossils within a 200-kilometer area. Fossils are present in high numbers and often show excellent quality of preservation. The most conspicuous fossils are skeletons and bones of whales and sea cows.
What's a sea cow?
I don't know, man.
What's a manatee?
You ever see the precursor to whales, like where whales came from?
No, where did they come from?
It was an ancient animal that was like almost like a hooved wolf.
What, sea animal?
No,
Oh, you mean,
it was
so they
a
were...
land animal. That's why they breathe air.
Oh, of course, they're mammals, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's super weird. It's super weird. It was some animal that supposedly lived on land and is real freaky looking, almost kind of like dog-like.
Yeah.
And that thing eventually
Became a
said,
whale.
I just like swimming.
I'm going to go back
And
into
then
the
one
sea.
day it said, I'm never going back to the land. It's filled with assholes. I'm just going to live out here in the ocean where all you have to contend with is sharks.
This article calls it the god of death whale.
Wow, that's what it looked like. That's what it looked like.
That's pretty terrifying.
But there's some images of it on land, some depictions. Yeah, that's what it looked like. That freaky thing was what whales came from. That thing walked around the ground and then eventually said,
If it's 40 million years ago, is that what those skeletons are then? Maybe.
Interesting. Some of them maybe, right? Because they do know that thing. It was when whales walked in Egypt. Wow. I was watching, I don't remember whose podcast it was. I wish I could remember. But they were talking to some guy that found definitive evidence of dinosaurs in Egypt. So if you go back far enough, there were dinosaurs living in that part of the world as well. What's that one image you just saw right there with the mouth open? Yeah, that one. That's crazy looking. Prehistoric whale ancestor. Look at that thing. Whoa. That's crazy.
Here's the sea cows.
What?
This image says a prehistoric sea cow was killed by a prehistoric croc
Wow.
and eaten by a tiger shark. But I don't know.
Boy. Life is hard where there's no doors. That's the problem with the ocean. There's no doors. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, you
So
get
it's
fucked
just
up.
constant chaos. It is just constant things eating things in this 3D space where they can go up and down and side to side. And
That's just nature, isn't it, man?
It
Everyone's
is.
just killing everything else, and
yes,
we made it.
but we figured out doors.
We did.
We figured out walls and doors, and that changed the game.
But when did we do that, Joe? That's the question.
That is the
because
question.
a lot of people would claim to think, and the kind of consensus always is that we didn't do that until 12,000 years ago. We didn't settle down and form permanent communities until the Neolithic Revolution. And I think that's one of the major paradigms, if you like, that we have regarding our past that simply doesn't make sense in light of new evidence. And
Egypt was crazy because Egypt is like Greece in that you have you can go to the Pantheon and you see that kind of stuff, right? But you go to Egypt and there's 4,000-year-old paint on the walls. And you're like, what? I can't get paint to stay on my wall for 10 years. And it's almost exclusively because of the climate. And it got buried in sand. But it's so wild. So wild.
When you say that 1% of ancient Egypt has been discovered, what do you really mean by that?
Of the percentage of what we know that happened in Egyptian history, 1% has been excavated in terms of what we can actually pull out of the ground and look at artifacts. So there's whole eras of pharaohs that we don't know where they're buried. Even when Tutankhamun was discovered, he was kind of a footnote in the pharaohs that we knew about at that time. And we didn't know he was, as extravagant, as rich as, until we discovered his actual tomb. Mm-hmm. A lot of people at that time didn't even think he was worth looking into, because we have these lists of pharaohs, and the thing with the pharaohs is that the next pharaoh is always trying to prove that he's the better one. And this is why you go to Egypt and you find statues of Ramses everywhere. And part of it was because Ramses, I think it was Ramses II, he commissioned so many statues of himself. Because he's like, oh, I'm the best. I'm the greatest. And they couldn't keep up with the commissioning, and they started actually rubbing off the names of previous pharaohs on statues and just putting Ramses on it.
Really?
Because
wow.
he was just, so you go from the top of Egypt to the bottom of Egypt, and you're going to find statues of Ramses.
He wanted to leave his mark.
And he did, right? Like, it worked.
We're talking about it now in 2024.
I know.
Yeah, that is nuts. So when you go there and you're in the presence of these things and you try to put yourself back into that time period, like, have you ever tried to think, like, what was the motivation to make something as great as the Pyramid of Giza, the Great Pyramid?
People definitely want to make their mark, right?
Right, but that's a mark that just doesn't even make sense.
There's something to that. I mean, if you think you're a god,
right,
and you have this whole kind of worldview perspective and theology that you need to make something that and bear yourself with all this crap because that's going to make a difference in your afterlife,
mm-hmm.
then you're going to go big rather than going home, right? So. The perceptions of people in the ancient world are just so different. We got it so good right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like longevity, health,
mm-hmm.
Food
mm-hmm.
is just on a completely different scale. And so the conventions of needing to make sure that, especially if you're like the richest guy around, that you tick off all the boxes because you're going to die. And you're probably going to die sooner than you want to, sooner rather than later. And you have this whole perception of, well, if I bury myself with all this stuff and maybe even some of the people, we're just going to kill them and include them too, because they're going to help me out. That's going to help me out in the afterlife.
You need slaves in the afterlife if you're a pharaoh.
Yeah, of course you do.
You can't just
Why
go
not,
by yourself.
right? Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So Khufu's pyramid, what's the timeline that he was even in power?
I don't know. I'm not an Egyptologist or an archaeologist necessarily, but he was. I think that was like 4,000 years ago. We only really have a tiny little statue of him.
That's
we don't
nuts.
actually have that much about him.
I guess he was busy making a pyramid.
So they say, right?
So they say.
Billy thinks different, but
a lot of people think different. That's what's interesting about it is the archaeological argument that like Dr. Robert Schoch makes about the water erosion in the Temple of the Sphinx.
Yeah,
that's a fascinating argument because it does appear like that's water erosion. And that would put the timeline way, way back.
Yeah, I think even just looking at the Sphinx, you can tell that no matter what your perspective is, you should entertain the idea, at minimum, that the head was built later.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it doesn't fit the body.
It has much less erosion. But you could also attribute that to the different densities of the stone. Like that's one of the things about these layers of limestone. It's like some of them are much more porous and some they erode easier.
Yeah.
You do see that.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing a terrible disservice by covering the Sphinx with like new stones and they redid the paws and they're doing all that. Like, my God, people, like leave it alone. Like leave it the way it is.
Yeah, it's this tricky balance between
restoration and recreation.
Yeah.
Because they're in a recreation stage.
Yeah.
And it was obviously they're doing it with smaller stones and it like looks different. It's not the same thing. It's not what it initially was. It was carved from one piece of stone.
Have you seen some of the restoration stuff that Saddam Hussein did in Iraq?
No.
Jamie, you got to pull up the ziggurat at
Oh, no.
So Saddam Hussein was a bit of a nut job, but he believed as this is as far as I understand it, that he was the recreation of Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, boy.
So he did all of this restorative work in Iraq on things like the walls of Babylon, and in Ur he rebuilt the ziggurat. Whoa. So if you look at that picture over there that says 1932 and 2022, that's what he did. Is he basically tried to rebuild this entire thing.
Wow.
And it's amazing. I am trying hard to get to Iraq because I wanna see this thing. Interestingly
Don't
enough,
die.
yeah.
Don't die, dude. Don't go over there.
So that's actually Ur.
So I'm sorry, but so this is the modern version with the small bricks. The original version, was it all carved from one piece?
No, it would have been clay bricks.
So these were clay bricks. So what do we? Jamie? Can you go back to the 1930 image, please, so we could see what it looked like? God, I would rather just have that. You know, I mean, I want to see what it looked like and what it looks like all these years later. I don't want to see a recreation, which is very similar to what they've done to the Sphinx.
Yeah, the Sphinx. Even when I was in Egypt, they were doing some work in like.
Can you, Jamie? Can you go to the rehabilitation of the Sphinx or whatever they would call it?
Yeah, I just clicked on like the ruins of it. I was going to go back to the 30s or 40s or something.
Well, the restoration part is the interesting part. Like you could see the restoration. If you go to just Google restoration of the Sphinx paws.
Well, they're talking about putting encasing stones on the pyramid.
Yeah, I've heard that too. God, don't do that.
I don't think they should do that either.
No, you shouldn't do anything. I mean, obviously they took the original casing stones off, but that's also history. So now you can see like the new paws. Well, that seems like the difference between buried and unburied.
Yeah.
So like even when Napoleon came upon, like right there, like isn't that restored?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there was much more erosion then. When Napoleon came upon it, it was buried, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that was the case.
Like over time, because you're dealing with these crazy sandstorms, over time everything gets kind of buried.
Oh, so much of it is under sand for so long.
Talking of pyramids, dude, this new pyramid shit that's just come out.
Oh, this is insane. Yeah, I was going to send this to you as well, Jamie. I'll send you one of the most comprehensive breakdowns of it on X because it's quite stunning. So apparently, through the use of LiDAR, they have discovered that there are enormous structures underneath the Great Pyramid that go kilometers deep into the earth with coils. So enormous pillars, and then these coils. They don't understand what it is because they're just looking at LiDAR images. But whatever this is a uniform structure. There's several pillars. And all of this is like very, very, very weird.
Yeah, it's 600 meters descending down those cylinders, and then there's more stuff below it, and then there's additional structures inside of it. Yeah, that was crazy.
It's really crazy. There's a guy, Jay Anderson, and he did a breakdown of it. Maybe this would be good. We could play this. It makes a little more sense when someone's explaining it to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, we need somebody that's an expert here, not me and you.
Zawi Hawass, by the way, has said it's nonsense. So I don't know.
Already?
Yes. According to Graham Hancock. This is the wonderful thing about having Graham
I texted
Hancock's
Graham yesterday. I was like, yeah, what's going on with this?
Yeah. So click on that and go full screen, please.
How significant of a discovery this is.
Dun, dun, dun. I love the music. And geometry, so you know it's real.
You got to appreciate the dramatic intro.
Project Unity.
What has just been announced in relation to the pyramids at the Giza Plateau and the plateau itself is so incredible, so awe-inspiring and narrative-shattering that I have been sitting here for the last hour trying to wrap my head around the implications of what we were just told. So this is pretty much breaking news because the new findings were announced on the 16th of March at a press conference held by the team who were studying the Great Pyramid of Giza with a non-invasive technology that was first developed by Filippo Bionde and Corrado Malanga called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography.
Fuck, that's a
This
mouthful.
was used to explore the internal
Chiropractic
structure
talk.
of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And this method leverages the analysis of micro movements typically generated by background seismic activity to achieve a high resolution full 3D tomographic imagery of the pyramid's interior and subsurface components. The recent findings from deploying this technology are nothing short of mind-blowing, because what's been discovered is that there are huge structures coming down from the base of the pyramid deep into the bedrock, in fact over 600 meters deep, which then connects to structures that extend up to 2 kilometers below the surface of the ground. 2 kilometers. Massive internal structures connected to the base of the pyramid and extending deep, deep down. This is what we know so far.
What does your friend think about it?
Which friend?
The one that you said it's bullshit.
Oh, that's not my friend. That's Zawi Hawass.
Okay.
Zawi Hawass is the head of antiquities in Egypt. He's like the head guy that talks to the archaeologists and gives the official narrative. In the past, he's been extremely hostile to Graham Hancock, but Graham Hancock and him have now become friends.
Oh, yes. I
And
do
they're
know this guy.
Coordinating. Graham is a lovely guy. The people that like are enemies with him just need to get to know him and hang out with him. He's a genuine, real human being who's trying to find the truth.